Welcome to UBI Unplugged, breaking down the future of income. I'm excited to dive into a really fascinating topic today, the intersection of universal basic income and the future of algorithmic trading. It's a complex area, but one with huge potential implications for how we structure our society and economy.
Yeah, it is complex. That's putting it mildly. I'm not entirely convinced UBI is the solution everyone makes it out to be. Seems like a lot of faith is being put in this idea without really thinking through all the possible downsides, you know?
Well, I think that's a fair point. There are definitely valid concerns and challenges that need to be addressed. It's not a magic bullet, that's for sure. But dismissing it outright, I think, is also missing the point. It's about how we adapt and adjust our policies to the changing landscape, especially with AI becoming so prominent in finance.
Exactly. And that's where algorithmic trading comes in. I mean, think about it. We're already seeing algorithms making more and more financial decisions, potentially displacing human workers. In a world where AI is managing a significant chunk of the market, what happens to the people who used to be traders or analysts? UBI could be a crucial safety net.
But wouldn't that just inflate everything? I mean, if everyone suddenly has more money, doesn't that just drive up prices? And then what? We're back where we started, but with higher prices and maybe even more people reliant on the government.
That's definitely a valid concern, and it's something economists have been debating. The inflationary pressure is real, but the key is in the design. The amount of the UBI, how it's funded, and how it interacts with existing social safety nets, all of that matters. We can't just blindly implement it without considering these factors.
And it's not just about mitigating the negative impacts, it's also about leveraging the opportunities. If people have a basic level of economic security, they're more likely to take risks, start businesses, and invest in their own skills. That could actually boost the economy in the long run.
Okay, but take risks. That sounds great in theory, but what if everyone just starts day trading on Robinhood with their UBI and loses it all? Then we're really in trouble.
That's a valid concern and speaks to the need for financial literacy programs alongside UBI. But I think it's also important to remember that people are generally rational. They're not going to just throw their money away, especially if it's their only source of income. And we're talking about a basic income, not a lottery win. It's meant to cover essential needs.
Exactly. And think about the ethical implications of algorithmic trading in a UBI-enabled world. If AI is making decisions that disproportionately benefit a small group of people while potentially destabilizing the economy, shouldn't we have a system in place to ensure that everyone benefits from technological progress? UBI could be a way to distribute the wealth generated by these algorithms more equitably.
But isn't that just punishing success? Why should we penalize people who are creating wealth? Seems like a recipe for stifling innovation.
I don't think it's about punishing success. It's about acknowledging that technological advancements often have unintended consequences. And it's about ensuring that the benefits of those advancements are shared more broadly. Think about it like infrastructure. We all benefit from roads and bridges, even if some people use them more than others. A basic income could be seen as a form of social infrastructure that supports everyone in a rapidly changing economy.
Right. And it's not necessarily about taking money directly from successful individuals or companies. It's about restructuring the tax system, maybe through a progressive tax on capital gains or a carbon tax, to generate the revenue needed to fund UBI. There are lots of different models we could explore.
A carbon tax? Now you're just piling on the complexity. I thought this was supposed to be a simple solution. A carbon tax would just make everything more expensive, right? And then we're back to the inflation problem, but now it's green inflation.
Okay, let's not get bogged down in the specifics of carbon taxes. The point is, there are various ways to fund UBI. And yes, any funding mechanism will have its own set of challenges and potential downsides. That's why it's so important to have a robust and transparent public debate about the different options.
Totally. And I think a lot of the skepticism around UBI comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what it's actually meant to achieve. It's not just about giving people free money. It's about creating a more resilient, equitable, and innovative society. It's about empowering people to pursue education, start businesses, and contribute to their communities.
But are people really going to do that? Or are they just going to sit at home and play video games all day? I mean, let's be honest, some people will. And who's going to pay for that?
Studies have actually shown that UBI doesn't necessarily lead to widespread work abandonment. People still want to work, they still want to contribute, but it gives them the breathing room to find more fulfilling work, or to start their own businesses, or to take care of their families.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the potential benefits to mental health and overall well-being. The stress and anxiety of financial insecurity can be incredibly debilitating. UBI could provide a much needed sense of stability and security, allowing people to focus on their health, their relationships, and their personal growth.
Okay, but what about the unintended consequences? We're talking about fundamentally changing the way our economy works. What if we get it wrong? What if it creates more problems than it solves? It feels like a huge gamble.
That's a valid concern, and that's why we need to approach it cautiously and incrementally. We can start with pilot programs, carefully monitoring the results and making adjustments as needed. We can't just flip a switch and expect everything to be perfect overnight.
Yeah, and that brings me back to the algorithmic trading piece, because the risks you're talking about, Otto, they're already being amplified by these AI systems. They can exacerbate existing inequalities, create flash crashes, and destabilize markets in ways we don't fully understand. So UBI isn't just some pie in the sky idea, it's a potential countermeasure to the growing power of these algorithms.
So you're saying UBI is a defense against Skynet? I mean, that's a bit dramatic, isn't it?
Okay, let's not get carried away with the Terminator references, but the point is valid. We need to think about how we regulate and govern these AI systems to ensure they're serving the public good. And UBI could be a way to mitigate the potential negative consequences of their actions.
Right. Think about it this way. If an algorithm causes a market crash and throws millions of people out of work, what's the alternative? Do we just let them suffer? Or do we have a safety net in place to catch them? UBI could be that safety net.
But isn't that just enabling irresponsibility? If people know they're going to be bailed out no matter what, aren't they less likely to be careful with their investments? It creates a moral hazard.
I think that's a simplistic view of human behavior. Most people don't want to be dependent on the government. They want to be self-sufficient and contribute to society. UBI isn't about encouraging irresponsibility. It's about providing a foundation of security that allows people to take calculated risks and pursue opportunities.
And it's not just about individual responsibility, it's about systemic risk. Algorithmic trading introduces new and complex forms of risk into the financial system. We need to think about how we manage those risks, and UBI could be a part of that solution.
Okay, but how do we even begin to regulate algorithmic trading? It seems like it's changing so fast that any regulations we put in place would be obsolete in a matter of months. We're always playing catch up.
That's a very real challenge. The pace of technological change is outpacing our ability to regulate it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. We need to invest in research and development to better understand how these algorithms work, and we need to develop regulatory frameworks that are flexible and adaptable.
And we need to involve ethicists, social scientists, and ordinary citizens in the conversation. This isn't just a technical problem, it's a societal problem. We need to have a broad and inclusive discussion about the values that we want to enshrine in our financial system.
So you're saying we need to have a national conversation about AI and UBI. That sounds daunting. I mean, how do you even get people to agree on anything these days?
It's definitely not going to be easy, but I think it's essential. We need to start by educating people about the potential benefits and risks of both UBI and algorithmic trading. We need to create spaces for dialogue and debate, where people can share their concerns and ideas. And we need to be willing to compromise and find common ground.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that this isn't just an abstract intellectual exercise. Like, this is about real people's lives. It's about ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to thrive in a rapidly changing world. And that's why I believe UBI is such a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Okay, I'm still not entirely convinced. But I'm willing to keep an open mind. I guess my biggest fear is that we're just creating a system that's even more complex and bureaucratic than the one we have now. And that's not exactly a recipe for success.
I share that concern. Simplicity and transparency are key. We need to design UBI in a way that's easy to understand and administer. And we need to be constantly evaluating its effectiveness and making adjustments as needed.
Absolutely. And that means being willing to experiment and learn from our mistakes. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. We need to adapt and innovate to meet the unique challenges of our time. But I believe that UBI, combined with thoughtful regulation of algorithmic trading, has the potential to create a more just and prosperous future for all.
All right, well, I'll be watching. With a very critical eye, I might add.
As you should be. We all should be. That's how we make sure we're moving in the right direction.
So to shift gears slightly, I've been reading some interesting takes on recent events that seem relevant to this whole discussion. I saw this article about the Trump voters who are now expressing regret, feeling betrayed by unfulfilled promises. It really highlights the disconnect between what's promised and what's delivered, you know?
Oh yeah, I saw something similar. People are easily swayed by promises, especially when they're struggling. But UBI to me feels like just another promise, maybe even a bigger one, and I'm just not sure it can deliver.
That's a valid point, Otto. The regret those voters are feeling now speaks to the need for realistic expectations and transparency in policy proposals. UBI shouldn't be sold as a panacea, but as one tool among many to address economic inequality.
Right. And it makes you wonder if policies like UBI had been in place, policies that directly support individuals, would those voters have felt so desperate and turned to Trump in the first place? It feels like a more direct safety net could have prevented that swing.
Maybe. Or maybe they would have just found something else to be angry about. People are always going to be unhappy about something. UBI isn't going to magically fix societal divisions.
True, it's not a cure-all. But addressing economic insecurity could certainly reduce a significant source of frustration and resentment. And that frustration, as we've seen, can be exploited politically.
Exactly. And then there's the dysfunction of Congress. I've been seeing commentary about how political gridlock is undermining economic policy. If Congress is constantly deadlocked, how can we effectively address these issues? Could UBI be a way to bypass some of that dysfunction by directly providing support to people?
Bypass Congress? That sounds revolutionary and probably unrealistic. They're not going to just give up their power that easily. Plus, Congress controls the purse strings. How would UBI get funded without their approval?
It would definitely require political will and skillful negotiation. But the argument for UBI could be framed as a way to reduce reliance on traditional welfare programs, which are often subject to political interference and budget cuts. It could be presented as a more streamlined and efficient approach.
And consider this. I was reading about the economic struggles faced by the Black community in Philadelphia. Some of those voters turned to Trump out of desperation, and now they regret it. It's heartbreaking. Could UBI be a more direct and efficient way to tackle those underlying economic issues rather than relying on piecemeal interventions?
Again, maybe. But are we sure UBI would actually reach the people who need it most? There are always going to be loopholes and bureaucratic hurdles. And what about people who are undocumented? Would they be eligible?
Those are crucial questions. The eligibility criteria would need to be carefully considered to ensure equitable access. And yes, the inclusion of undocumented immigrants would be a complex but important issue to address, given their vulnerability to economic hardship.
And it's not just about Philadelphia. We're seeing this pattern across the country. The erosion of support for Trump among voters who initially backed him on economic grounds is significant. It points to a deep dissatisfaction with the status quo and a yearning for real change.
Or maybe it just means people are fickle and easily influenced by the latest news cycle. I wouldn't read too much into it. People are sheep.
Cynical as always, Otto, but I think there's something to be said for understanding the specific economic concerns of those voters. What promises were made? What expectations were raised? And how can we learn from those experiences to develop more effective policies?
Exactly. And even the recent dip in inflation, seemingly despite some of the tariff policies, indicates that those policies aren't as effective as advertised. It underscores the need for a more nuanced and sustainable approach to economic stabilization, rather than relying on disruptive trade policies.
Tariffs are just a mess. I never understood them. It's like trying to fix a broken leg with a Band-Aid.
Precisely. It's a short-term fix with potentially long-term consequences, and it highlights the need for policies that address the root causes of economic instability rather than just treating the symptoms.
And speaking of instability, the potential for widespread fear and instability induced by aggressive immigration enforcement practices could have a detrimental effect on local economies, harming small businesses and impacting broader economic development. It underscores the critical link between economic security, civil liberties, and social equity.
Immigration is a hot-button issue. People have very strong opinions on both sides. I don't see UBI magically solving that problem.
It wouldn't solve the underlying political disagreements, no, but it could mitigate the economic vulnerability of immigrants, especially in targeted cities. It could provide a safety net that reduces fear and instability, allowing them to contribute more fully to the economy.
And that's not just hypothetical. I saw a report about arrests connected to deportation plans and even potential talks about suspending habeas corpus. That raises serious concerns about the erosion of fundamental civil liberties and the potential for systematic targeting of marginalized communities. UBI could provide a crucial safety net in that kind of environment.
Suspending habeas corpus? That's scary. Feels like something out of a dystopian novel. I still don't see how UBI fits into all of this, though.
It's about providing a buffer against economic precarity in a situation where people are already facing immense social and political pressures. It's about ensuring that they have the resources they need to survive and resist injustice.
Exactly. And it ties back to the algorithmic trading piece as well, because if AI is being used to identify and target vulnerable populations, whether for immigration enforcement or other purposes, UBI could be a way to level the playing field, to provide those communities with the resources they need to protect themselves.
So you're saying UBI is a form of resistance? I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that framing.
It's not necessarily about resistance in a political sense. It's about resilience. It's about empowering people to cope with difficult circumstances and to build a better future for themselves and their families.
And it's about ensuring that everyone benefits from technological progress, not just a select few. It's about creating a more just and equitable society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And that's why I believe UBI is such a crucial idea, even if it's complex and challenging to implement.
All right, I hear you. I'm still skeptical, but I'm willing to admit that there's more to this than I initially thought.
And that's all we can ask for, right? An open mind and a willingness to engage in a thoughtful and honest debate.
Exactly. And to bring it back to algorithmic trading, it's clear that we need to think critically about the ethical implications of these technologies. We need to ensure that they're not exacerbating existing inequalities or creating new forms of injustice. And UBI could be a powerful tool for mitigating those risks.
Okay, but what are the alternatives to UBI? If you don't think UBI will work, what can people do? What other solutions are there? Are we overlooking other options by focusing so much on UBI?
That's a great question, Otto. And you're right, we shouldn't treat UBI as the only possible solution. There are other approaches worth exploring. We could strengthen existing social safety nets like unemployment insurance and food stamps. We could invest in job training and education programs to help people acquire the skills they need to succeed in the changing economy. We could raise the minimum wage to provide a living wage for all workers.
Yes, and those are all valuable approaches, but they often fall short. Unemployment insurance doesn't cover everyone, and it's often difficult to access. Job training programs aren't always effective, and they don't guarantee a job. And raising the minimum wage can have unintended consequences, like job losses and price increases. UBI offers a more universal and unconditional form of support.
Okay, but what about negative income tax? Isn't that a simpler way to achieve the same goal? It's basically UBI, but it's targeted at low-income households.
Negative income tax is definitely worth considering. It's less expensive than UBI and it's more targeted at those who need it most. But it also has its drawbacks. It can be complex to administer, and it can create disincentives to work. People might be hesitant to earn more money if it means losing their benefits.
And it still doesn't address the underlying issue of economic insecurity. Even with a negative income tax, people are still vulnerable to job losses, medical emergencies, and other unexpected expenses. UBI provides a more stable and predictable source of income.
Okay, but what about, I don't know, empowering local communities to address their own economic challenges? Instead of relying on a top-down solution like UBI, why not give communities the resources they need to create their own jobs and businesses?
That's a great idea in theory, but it's often difficult to implement in practice. Many communities lack the resources and expertise they need to develop successful economic development strategies. And even if they do, it can take years to see results. UBI can provide immediate relief while communities work on long-term solutions.
And it's not an either or proposition. We can do both. We can implement UBI to provide a basic safety net, while also investing in local communities to help them create jobs and businesses. The two approaches can complement each other.
So what's the bottom line? Is UBI the answer to all our problems, or is it just another pipe dream?
It's neither. It's a complex and potentially valuable tool that could help us address some of the biggest challenges facing our society. But it's not a magic bullet, and it's not without its risks. We need to approach it cautiously and thoughtfully, and we need to be willing to experiment and learn from our mistakes.
Exactly. It's about creating a more resilient, equitable, and innovative society. And UBI combined with thoughtful regulation of technology and a commitment to social justice could be a powerful step in that direction.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you both for a fascinating discussion.
Yeah, thanks. I'm still not entirely sold, but I learned a lot.
Thanks for joining us. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep pushing for a better future.